Guys, welcome back to another episode of the Ojiako podcast, where I just as a novice, a mixed martial arts novice fan, I give my predictions on the fights that are coming up and my analysis on the fights that have happened. So, delving straight into UFC Vegas 22, happening this coming weekend. So we have on the main card, starting with from the bottom, I'll start from the bottom. Cheyenne Bays versus Montserrat Ruiz. So looking at Cheyenne Bays, when she fought Bridget Nielsen at the Tough Enough fighting promotion. This is another organization who I've never heard of, but I only heard of it because of her name. And I think this fight that she's going to be fighting against Bridget Nielsen, it's going to be her debut fight in the UFC. So it'll be interesting to watch. And Tough Enough, I've never heard of the organization. But looking back, just looking at her one of her last fights there before she moved on to the UFC, and she got the contracts to fight in the UFC. I could see why she got the contracts to fight in the UFC. She is very good on the ground. She has a very good ground game. From what I saw in the fight when she fought Bridget Nielsen, she's a good striker, and it's easy to see why she got the contracts the way she did. So I mean, I've not seen much else of her fighting. From what I can see on social media these days, I mean, especially on platforms like YouTube, I mean, unless if you're in one of the big organizations, especially organizations like the UFC, you don't really get to see much of the other athletes fights if then any other organization outside of Bellator, the UFC, One Championship or PFL. So I don't know much about her, but there's not even a Wikipedia page about this fighter. But then again, if the UFC picks her up, then she must be a very good proposition. She must be a very promising athlete. So it'll be interesting to see how she does. Now she'll be going up against Montserrat Ruiz, and I have not seen much of her fighting either. But there was one match she fought. Another fighter going by the name of Morandino. God, I should have picked up. But in this fight, she just executed I think she just. No, it wasn't a knocker, but I'm not going to ramble on too much about something which I didn't do proper research on. But I know it's not going to be good for this podcast, but the first lady shown by I saw her fighting. It's really good. I didn't see much of the opponent that she's going to be. God, I just mixed this whole thing up. Sorry, guys. Sorry. No, it's Montserrat Ruiz. Didn't see much of her fighting. But again, I'm assuming it should be an interesting matchup, at least for the with the first lady, Cheyenne Bays. I heard her name being pronounced as Bays, not Buzz, because her surname's being pronounced or spelled Buys, as if buys if you're buying something. But I'm assuming that will be a promising fight, entertaining fight. So moving on, we have Song Kenan from China versus Max Griffin. So looking at Song Kenan, this is another fighter who I've never heard of. Only when I looked back at only because of this up and coming fighting event UFC Vegas 22 that's happening this coming weekend. His name was on the fight card. Looked him up. Looked at one of his past fights against Callum Potter. Callum Potter coming out of New Zealand. His stand-up is good. Striking is good as well. But excuse me, one of the things I saw in the fight, and it was also confirmed by one of the commentators there, is that he's quite strong and powerful how he performs in the cage. I think at one point his opponent Callum Potter was just what were they doing? There was a clinch which turned into a takedown, and Kenan managed to reposition himself and actually mount himself onto Potter's back. So it's just one of the things that was pointed out, and one of the things I saw in the cage there. Now he's going up against Max Griffin, and looking at Max Griffin when he fought Alex Oliveira at UFC 248. I'm now when it comes to the fighters just when they're starting the fight, especially at the beginning of the first round, I try my best just to think of a word, just a descriptive text of how to describe how they're moving in the cage, whether they're moving evasively, or they're just going straight for the kills, like someone like who can I think of? Yeah, like Bilal Muhammad, whereby they be quite evasive, like Dominic Cruz. I mean, I say like Dominic Cruz. I mean, every fighter, depending on who they're going to fight in any event, they will change their fighting style just to their benefit, so they can actually attack their opponent more effectively. And of course, everything work in their favor. They will have a better chance at winning that particular competition. So, for Max Griffin, when he was fighting Alex Oliveira at UFC 248, first of all, it did look like he was pacing backwards and forwards. His ground game was good. When he goes in for the takedown, he's good at keeping his opponents on the floor. In this case, at UFC 248, he kept Oliveira pinned down to the ground for a long while, and his stand-up was decent. And can I say he'll be matched up with Song? Again, Song, Song Kenan, his striking's good, stand-up's good. In my opinion, anyway, stand-up's quite good. His striking is good, and also he's known for his strength as well. So I think I would go with I'll go with Max Griffin, because I've seen that in the past, although many times I've been proven to be wrong and incorrect. But for me, from what I can see, from watching the fight, I mean, I've not actually been in a professional competitive fight before, but in MMA. But when from what I've seen, if your takedowns are good, if you can keep your opponent on the floor for a long time, then you can get them into submission, rear naked chokeholds, armbar. It's easy to get them to submit because you've got the advantage. You can keep them on the floor for a long time. You can even keep them there, and if you can keep them the position in the right way, control them, as they say, be in control of that takedown, it can issue some really nasty, heavy strikes and elbows. So for me, that's the reason why I say that if you're good at takedowns, then you've got the advantage of winning the fight. I'm assuming, but I'm a novice. I still have lots of fights to watch and lots of things to learn about this sport. But a few times I've said that before in the past, and the opposite has been the case. But I mean, from this, if I had to put my money on it, Max Griffin versus Son Kenan at UFC Vegas 22 this coming weekend, I think I'm going to go with Max Griffin. But again, in this sport, anything can happen. The tables can be turned. There could be an illegal move, an eye poke, or an illegal knee, as you've seen in the past two events. So, now that's not to throw any sort of salt or just to throw anything like that, or joking at Bilal Muhammad or Aljamain Sterling. Just that it's one of the things that we've seen, that you say this person will win or that person will win. But then on fight day, fight night, something controversial seems to happen in the cage. I mean, there's a 50-50 chance of that happening, and that not happening. Moving up the card, we have Adrian Yanez versus Gustavo Lopez. Now, Yanez, I looked at one of his fights when he fought Victor Rodriguez. Sorry, I didn't get the particular the actual event when it happened. But looking at the fight, he's good at defending clinches and takedowns. Stand up is good. There's a sort of opponent that will follow and track his follow. The words I use are like follow and track his opponent inside the cage there, and corner them and going for an attack and put pressure on them just to attack them in one part of the octagon where they don't really have that much room to maneuver around or to move. And his striking did appear to be quite precise, tactical. His opponent, Gustavo Lopez, now he fought I think his last fight, one of his most recent fights, and with that man should come across, which took place at an event, fighting promotion known as Combat 42, and they didn't show the whole match, but this guy managed to get his opponent just finished in just one single. Wasn't a single KO, but it was just counter strikes, and then but there was one shot that landed perfectly on his opponent's jaw, and he went down. And as Michael Bisping said about one past fight and one past event, the female commentator said, yes, he went down as stiff as a board. Just it was a single right hook, and it's just one of those situations. Like, even now when I see it happen, and I've seen quite a few fights before to see how certain people, like certain fighters, are knocked out by their opponent, and when they go down, they actually do look like they're stiff, like they're going to some sort of semi-concussion on the ground. It's shocking to see. Just absolutely shocking to see. Between Yanez and Lopez, who do I think will take this fight? Who do I think will win? Probably Yanez. I mean, a knockout like what Lopez did to Roquette at Combat 42. Again, I don't know much about this, but I'm learning all the time. So I always say that because I just don't be seen as an idiot, because I'm not always sure of what I'm saying. But a knockout like that, I think, only happens if you're lucky, if you manage to just in the madness of all the shots you're throwing at your opponent, you may be lucky to just land the right one that does the job for you, and then job done. You've got it in the bag. You've won the fight. So, and I think when Gustavo Lopez's fight was fighting Joey Roquette at Combat 42, then that's probably more than likely what happened. Likewise, what happened with Jorge Masvidal and Ben Askren at a past UFC event, which off the top of my head I cannot remember the particular event it was, but just within the first 10 to 15 seconds of the first round, as soon as Jorge Masvidal got in there, as soon as Ben Askren got in there, Masvidal just threw a knee and knocks Ben Askren clean out. It just knocks Ben Askren clean out, and he went down. He was stiff, also stiff as a board as well. But without ranting too much and rambling, out of these two people, I think maybe Adrian Yanez will come out as a victor. But let's wait and see what happens. Moving on up the card, still we have Gregor Gillespie versus Brad Riddell. So looking at Gillespie's past fight when he fought Kevin Lee at UFC 244. Now this fight he lost because Kevin Lee got a good solid head kick in there, and Gillespie went down and he was partially knocked out. But you could see that he was just he looked like someone who, as he went down, wasn't entirely sure of where he was. So I've got to make sure that I'm speaking clear into his microphone, because my sound recorder is showing just probably that the volume is going to be a bit too low when I'm editing this. But looking at that fight, Gillespie was really active and sharp on his feet, and his stand-up did look good, but unfortunately he did lose because of that good leg kick that Kevin Lee got in there. Now his opponent, Brad Riddell, he looking at his past fight when he fought Alex de Silva Coelho at UFC 253. Now it did look like he was struggling to defend the takedown, but his ground game was yeah. So I can't again when trying to understand my own handwriting. So Riddell, it did look like he can defend a takedown well. His ground game was good, especially in order to defend himself, and his stand-up seemed good also. So out of these two, who do I think will take it? I think because they say you're only as good as your last fight, and some of these fights, their past fights, I just couldn't find them. And a lot of these guys I've never really heard of them before. And even some of their fights are not even on the UFC Fight Pass, believe it or not. But who do I think will win? I think it'll be a close one, but if I had to put my money on it, probably Riddell. Yeah, probably Brad Riddell. I think he would win. Moving on, starting the main event itself. Derek Brunson versus Kevin Holland. So Derek Brunson versus Kevin Holland, the main event of UFC Vegas 22. So Derek Brunson, I've never really heard of him before. Kevin Holland, I know, I heard of him quite a few times. But Derek Brunson, his past fight at UFC Vegas 5, probably not one of his past fights, but it's one of the fights I came across just to judge how well he could perform in this fight, and if whether possibly he could win the fight. His fight against Edmund Shabazan. Edmund Shabazan. God. His fight against Edmund Shabazan. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, guys. If it's wrong, please leave a correction in the comment. Please correct me as best you can in the comment section below on YouTube. And in that fight, his stand-up was good. His ground game was good. So I'm assuming that, when it comes to takedowns and clinches, especially takedowns, that area he's going to excel there. Manage to keep his opponent on the ground, and might finally potentially get them into a submission, hold them down there, control them, and get them to a rear naked chokeholds, or keep them down there and start dishing out really nasty strikes and elbows. Kevin Holland, on the other hand, when he fought Ronaldo Souza, his one thing I noticed about Kevin Holland is that he's a sort of fighter like Adesanya, whereby his strikes are very quick, sharp. The way he moves is very slick, very athletic, very agile. It's very sharp. His stand-up's good, and his ground game is also good as well. But out of these two, who do I think would win? I think I'll probably give it to Kevin Holland. But it's kind of like the same thing that people are talking about for UFC 259 with Adesanya and Blachowicz. Let me go use their first names, between Israel and Jan. Many people are saying even Jan's close friend Joanna, who her surname I still cannot remember, and that's not very helpful to me or to this podcast, because if it's going to be a good mixed martial arts podcast or sports podcast, you should know the names properly of all the athletes you're talking about, at least all the relevant people you're mentioning. But it kind of like echoes what was the sorts of predictions people are giving for the main event of UFC 259 between Israel and Jan. Many people are saying that Israel would have won that fight, because even though he would have to put on more size to match up with the weight class to compete in this particular fight, he still has that athleticism and the agility and that slick movement, and he's really good at striking. So he still has all of his benefits on his side working in his favor. Jan has the power and the size and the extra height, but still, I think overall Israel, especially because of his athleticism and his agility, he still has the upper hand in this match. Even Joanna, who's a good close friend of Jan, she said herself that in this fight, Jan has everything to lose, but Israel is the opposite. He has everything to gain. Supposedly, that's what I'm taking away from the statement that she made. So I'm saying that Kevin Holland could win this because of his ability to move fast, like he can do, and throw strikes in there really quickly and sharply. But again, you never know, anything could happen. Again, like what happened at UFC 259. Everybody thought that Israel Adesanya would win. I thought that Adesanya would win. And yeah, okay. I wasn't particular about the two guys. They're both nice guys, respectful, humble guys. Excuse me. But it went the other way, and everybody was surprised again. Going back to UFC 257, everybody thought that, and I've said this nearly a zillion times now. Everybody thought that Conor McGregor would win this fight. Even I thought that Conor McGregor would win that fight, but I wanted Dustin Poirier to win. And Dustin Poirier did win, but even in my heart of hearts, my guts were telling me that no, Dustin Poirier, my gut was telling me that Conor McGregor is going to go in there, and Conor McGregor is going to do what Conor McGregor does best and what he's known for, and he's going to win. But that just wasn't the case at all. Many people were saying that he was just concentrating and trying to show off that he's mastered some new boxing skills, that he wants to prove to the world that he's a boxer. I think people were saying that he was actually wasting more time, or putting more time and energy into like kind of showing off skills that probably that would probably represent him as a boxer. that he should have been concentrating on the skills you need in a mixed martial arts environment, in a mixed martial arts match competition, and using that just to beat your opponent to win the fight. Because Dustin Poirier, those leg kicks really works in his favor, and eventually McGregor went down and Poirier won the fight. So that's my take on the main card for UFC Vegas 22 that's coming up this weekend. Again, I say that very humbly. I still feel that my opinion obviously doesn't count for much, because who am I? But again, I say that very humbly because a lot of the time, 90% of the time, I'm still very unsure about the things I say when it comes to this sport. But there have been claims now that, and quite a few people have been talking about this, that the gloves used by the mixed martial arts fighters in the UFC, that the gloves that they're using should be changed. I think GSP, George St. Pierre, was being interviewed either it was earlier today or just recently, and he was I think he was talking about the gloves that were being used, especially of course this surrounds the eye poke that happened at UFC Vegas 21 between Leon Edwards and Bilal Muhammad. I think twice. There was the first eye poke in the first round, then the second eye poke in the second round that really just did it, and Bilal Muhammad just really couldn't continue the match, couldn't continue the fight. It was just too severe. And one of the things that were being said is that should the boxing gloves that are being used by the athletes in the UFC should they be changed? And he was comparing it to the gloves that they use in Bellator, and I was surprised because I actually thought that the gloves they use, though I know the different sizes that go by ounce, the actual gloves, the design of the gloves actually differs. One thing that was pointed out, they actually showed photographs of the two gloves side by side. The UFC gloves actually do not fully cover your whole hand, especially your fingers, whilst the Bellator gloves do cover much of your hand. So the UFC gloves leaves much of your hand exposed, but the Bellator glove actually does the opposite. That doesn't fully cover it, but the Bellator gloves are designed in such a way that if you're going to throw a strike or a jab, whatever, and actually is more than likely going to be at your opponent's head, which of course gives there's going to be that risk that your fingers or any moving part of your hand will touch their eye. There's if you're going to be using Bellator gloves, there's a lesser chance of that happening because it covers most of your hand, and it covers most of your hand that your hand is almost like in this way, in this shape, that you can't really move your fingers that much. Whilst the UFC gloves, I think the ends of your fingers, just near the tips, most of that is exposed, so there's a good chance that you could move your fingers, whether it's intentionally or accidentally. And if that jab is close to your opponent's eye, there's a good chance that you could the tip of your finger could go into their eye socket, and you have an eye poke on your hand. So that is something that's I do wonder why most, although it's a business and most fighting organizations, like not even when it comes to gloves, just how they do. There's the basic rules of mixed martial arts, and the fighting organizations also have their own rules as well, which the fighters have to abide by, if they want to fight for the organization. So that is that is an interesting topic, and it depends whether the UFC want to do that. Do they want to change to gloves that can actually reduce the risk of this happening? Because it's not the first time it's happened before, and I'm actually surprised. In this fight between Bilal Muhammad and Leon Edwards, the eye poke happened twice, and you're thinking the first time that happened, you need to be, to Leon Edwards, you need to be careful. Something inside me was kind of thinking, he did it the first time, he did it the second time. Was it deliberate? Was it intentional? Were you kind of hoping that your opponent would injure your opponent as such? Probably. Gotta be careful what I say, but were you hoping that maybe you had injured your opponent in such a way that you didn't want to continue this fight, or so? Probably didn't want to risk losing. it was clear that in the first round in this fight, Leon Edwards did have the upper hand. He was winning the fight. The way he was performing was really good. In fact, the way that he was performing was such that Bilal Edwards wasn't fighting in that manner that he's known for just kind of cornering his opponent, keeping them there, and then putting the pressure on and just attacking them from head to toe. So yeah, in the first round he was winning, and he moving on to the fact, moving away from the glass now, but moving on to the fact that after that eye poke in the second round, and after the whole event had to result in a contest and in a draw, Dana White did say that they would have to get a rematch on, and everybody was happy with that. Well, most people were happy with that, but Leon Edwards later said at the post press conference that actually he's not interested in doing a rematch. And I was thinking, well, that's really now I still have the mind of someone who isn't fully vested in this sport yet. Excuse me. And when I thought about it, I was thinking, well, that's oh god, I was kind of like going along the moral route and thinking that's really selfish of you, kind of use and abuse your opponent like that. And he's complaining that because when he was poked in the eye there, it was horrible to see. He was in agony. The second time it happened, he was in proper sheer pure agony. He was even crying there. And some people said to me in my DMs on Instagram when I posted about it, one person said, yeah, there was a pain side, the painful side, and also the other side that he became very emotional and emotive about the fight. That he's, because the injury is so bad, and he even said it, I can't see anything, I can't see anything at all. So they had to stop the fight. And I think he was also emotional, not just because of the pain and the injury, but also because of the fact that he had to stop the fight. And of course, if he had won that fight, of course, it's been very beneficial to him. And he took that fight at such short notice. I think about 2 or 3 weeks notice. So it's really, really short notice to make weight, to get in shape, to train, and anything else that's relevant. So I can understand how he felt. So I was thinking that actually Leon Edwards saying no to Bilal Muhammad was actually really wrong and disrespectful. And to Bilal Muhammad, it's like he's been used and abused like that. And I was talking to Charlie. Charlie explains to me, yeah, it's understandable that Bilal Muhammad will feel that way, be saying those things, but unfortunately, he also understood where Leon Edwards was coming from. That this fight really was he needed to fight someone. He'd been dormant for more than a year. His last fight was in the middle of 2019. So we've gone through the whole of 2020. Had the pandemic, the COVID crisis that started, and Leon Edwards just had a whole year off, not if he was making or doing, but because the guy who was supposed to fight, Hamza Shemaev, had to pull out 2 or 3 times because of he was sick of COVID-19. So they had to schedule a fight for him. He's been waiting for such a long time, and for a fighter to be in their prime and not to be fighting or be active, that's not good. It's not good at all in the sport. So should there be a rematch? Charlie did explain to me that if there's a rematch, really it doesn't do anything for Leon Edwards. And of course, there is the risk that if Leon Edwards does lose the fight, then of course he plummets down the rankings, whilst the other guy does go up the rankings. So I'm sure he's being wise and he's being very smart in his decision making. At the same time, in the first round, it was clear to see that he was winning the fight, that he won that first round. So I guess so tongue twisted and so tongue tied. I can understand if he doesn't want to have a rematch. Now for this one, I'm not going to be on the fence. I think maybe I'm going to side with Leon Edwards. It's a smart decision to make, actually. He wants a title fight. Many people actually disagree, and after the UFC Vegas 21, whereby just sympathy was pouring in from all over the mixed martial arts community about Muhammad's eye. I think he did he had mentioned he wants a title fight, but I don't think any of the other fighters, any of the other members of the community who actually even taking notice of that. They're more concerned for Muhammad's injury. So make of that what you will. For me, well, probably not. I don't think anyone's going to be watching that fight. Or I don't think there's going to be any interest or demand for that fight, because based on the first rounds, from what everybody could see, it's clear who the winner was of. Could I say that there was a winner of this fight? No, because it didn't run its full course. It wasn't really a fair fight. But I mean, people probably will make their own conclusions based on the just what they saw in the first round. They're seeing who was winning, who had the advantage, and who had the upper hand. So I think in this case, yeah, I think Leon Edwards probably is right. A rematch probably wouldn't be wise, at least for himself, from a business standpoint. And yeah, lastly, the Kamaru Usman versus Jorge Masvidal rematch. Well, we wouldn't really call it a rematch, but Usman versus Masvidal 2, the second fight, is scheduled and it's going to be taking place in April. Only problem is that now, I think it's supposed to be taking place at UFC 261, but the venue they're supposed to be using, which I think is also used by the WWE, wrestlers have actually tested positive for COVID-19, and there's been a lot of tests, a lot of athletes, and more than likely a lot of members of staff who work in the venue, they've tested positive for the virus also. So there's worry now that this event is going to be compromised, and it was supposed to be held and hosted in front of a packed arena. Not necessarily packed, but I think there's about 15 or 17,000, just the normal number of people that you'd expect to attend a UFC fight for two top fighters and two big names in the sport of MMA, and especially in the UFC. So they are worried that this issue of COVID-19 is gonna affect things. So but let's wait and see what happens. Fingers crossed that will not be the case, and Dana White and his team can work something out, because that is a fight that I would like to see myself. So guys, hope you enjoyed my video. Hope you enjoyed my podcast. I still have an issue with this rambling thing. Probably this time around I didn't have a drink before shooting this video, and if I was shooting this video and making this podcast probably early in the day, in the middle of the day, probably had like a can of Monster or like Body Armor energy drink here. In the evening, I probably would have had like Jack Daniels or some cider just to calm my nerves. But unfortunately, it's too late in the night to drink anything like a Monster. I don't have anything alcoholic here to drink. I just want to get this podcast done and just get it out there. So guys, if you did enjoy the content, please don't forget to leave a like, and do please subscribe. I'm now at 75 subscribers as I'm making this podcast. I know it's not much, but I'm still very grateful. I never thought that I'd even get even half of that number, but people gradually are coming around to my content and seeing my videos, and probably they do appreciate my love that I do have for the sport, and they respect the fact that I do want to learn more about the sport as well. So guys, you can also listen on Spotify, Google Podcasts, SoundCloud, and soon there will be the Apple Podcast. My podcast will be in their directory as well. I'm going to be making changes to my just to the intro. The logo will stay the same for now. Just going to make some changes, add some music, and trying to add an end card to the end of the video as well, for if you're going to be watching on YouTube. So guys, I'm bad habit of saying I'm being more direct in what I'm saying. Yes guys, so and also on Instagram you can follow me. My name's Ojiako, and on Twitter my name's Ojiako. Thanks again.